In Diablo, I've always been one to start with the Barbarian class when they're available, and it's been a class I've been waiting to cover. So here's our look ahead video to Diablo 4 and what you need to know about the Barbarian class. Barbarians are one of the most powerful classes in Diablo, especially physical power, managing to one-hand double-handed weapons, scream their opponents into submission, and overall become a mini version of the Hulk in this mythical world. Here are a few things you should know when it comes to Barbarians, but before we begin this video, here's a word from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by HelloFresh, and in all reality, I love to eat healthy, and it always kills me to see so many diets and so many rash dietary choices that people make when the simplistic approach is the best. Healthy meals filled with nutrients and carbohydrates in moderation. With HelloFresh, you get fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. HelloFresh makes home cooking easy, fun, and affordable, and that's why it's America's #1 meal kit. It's a great alternative to skip the grocery store, and not to mention that HelloFresh's Festive Fare collection features limited time recipes made with seasonal produce and premium proteins, so you can host those special dinners and special holiday moments. But not only that, with HelloFresh, you achieve those New Year resolutions by eating well and can be stress-free and delicious. With over 35 weekly recipes, you have the option you're looking for to help you achieve your goal. Choose calorie smart or carb smart recipes, or even customize select meals by swapping proteins or size, upgrading your proteins, or adding protein to a veggie dish. But in the end, with growing grocery expenses, HelloFresh helps save you money all year round. In fact, HelloFresh is cheaper than grocery shopping and 25% cheaper than takeout. So I do recommend you try HelloFresh and see what the big deal is. You can either use my code at checkout, or you can go in the description and utilize the link there for a special limited time discount plus free shipping, and try HelloFresh out today. Now, back to the video. Barbarians are massive DPS and come with a variety of strengths depending on playstyles. They deal tremendous damage utilizing their core skills and are the only class in Diablo 4 that have the Berserker mode, which increases damage by 25% and movement speed by 30%. Even though they may not be as maneuverable as the reintroduced Rogue class, they have skills and boosts to increase their movement speed while at the same time have skills to deal DPS at range. They also have the only benefit in the game to equip 4 weapons at the same time, dual wielding 2 single-handed weapons or dual wielding 2 two-handed weapons, which you can swap out back and forth. This gives the player a massive boost depending on loot rarity and legendary skills on those weapons, but in the end their main focus is to be that tank, take the brunt of the damage and manage to deliver it right back to the attackers. But with all that, there has to be some negatives to Barbarians. Barbarians focus on using Fury as their main source of ability, and their core skills have a tendency of depleting Fury very quickly. Not only that, Barbarian skills also encompass a longer cooldown, especially on your ultimate skills and shouts. There are ways to lessen the cooldowns, of course, but in comparison to other classes, this is still at a disadvantage. They require competing most of the time at close combat and can be a bit bulky and slow paced during the early stages of the game. But even with these weaknesses, Barbarians are a force not to be reckoned with, and their skill tree showcases why. In general, the skill tree in Diablo 4 will be specific to each class, and each active skill can be enhanced with another skill point and increase its specialization even further. You can also increase a skill's ability and strength with weapons that would have specific modifiers to add skill levels to your existing skills or new ones. In addition to the active skill, you will also find passive skills throughout the tree, with improved damage, cooldown, utility, defensive, and more. So let's talk about some of these skills, starting off with the basic ones. Basic skills in Barbarians are skills that help generate Fury, and these are a few of them to know: Bash, Flay, Frenzy, and Lunging Strike. I won't cover the upgrades for these, but just the general description and damage they cause. Here are some details about them. Bash, Fury generation is 10, critical hit chance 50%. You deal 31% damage bashing an enemy with your weapon. Bashing an enemy 4 times, your next bash will stun that enemy for 1.25 seconds. This increases using two-handed weapons. Flay. Fury generation 9. critical hit chance 50%. Flay an enemy dealing 5% damage and inflict a 38% bleeding effect over 5 seconds. Lunging Strike. Fury Generation 9, critical hit chance 50%. Lunge forward and strike an enemy for 31% damage. Frenzy. Fury Generation is 5, critical hit chance is 30%. Requirements for this is dual wielding weapons. Connect a flurry of blows dealing 21% damage with each pair of hits, and if Frenzy hits an enemy, their attack speed is reduced by 20% for 3 seconds, and that can stack up to 60%. Core skills will spend Fury to implement massive damage for the Barbarians, and more targets than the basic skills. Here are the core skills to know and their effects. Again, I'm not covering all upgrades, only base effects and enchantments. Hammer of the Ancients. Fury cost 35. Critical hit chance 40%. The requirement is that you have to have a two-handed bludgeoning weapon. This move slams your hammer down with a Fury and deals 50% damage to the concentrated area. The enchantment for this: for each enemy damaged by Hammer of the Ancients, you gain 3% more Fury for 5 seconds, and can stack up to 10 times, improving Fury generation for each basic attack. Upheaval. Fury cost 35. Critical hit chance 20%. Requirement: you need a two-handed weapon. Utilize your strength and fling debris towards your enemy and deal 73% damage. The enhancement to this adds a chance to stun by 20% on all enemies for 2.5 seconds. Rend. Fury cost 35. Critical hit chance 33%. Requirements: a slashing weapon. Rend cleaves enemies in front of you and deals 13% damage, and inflicts 101% bleeding damage over a 5-second period. The enhancement for this effect: direct damage to an enemy extends the duration of vulnerability on enemies by 2 seconds, adding additional damage they will sustain at your attack. Whirlwind. Fury cost is 20 per second. Critical hit chance is 20%. Requirements: none. Spin with your weapon and attack the surrounding enemies for 12% damage. Enhancement: gain 1 Fury every time Whirlwind deals direct damage to an enemy, or 3 Fury against elite enemies. Double Swing. Fury cost 25. Critical hit chance 30%. Requirements: dual wielding weapons. Swing both weapons from each side, causing 38% damage with each weapon. If enemies are caught in the middle, they receive damage from both weapons. Enhancing the skill: damaging a stunned or knocked down enemy generates 25 Fury. Defensive skills provide a boost of defensive capabilities and give you the ability to control enemies in an AoE environment. Biggest downfall in these skills is that they come with a big cooldown. Once again, we cover the basic defensive skills plus the enhancements, but not the upgrades. I'm letting those be a surprise to you. Rallying Cry. Cooldown 25 seconds. This cry grants you a 30% increase in movement speed and a times 50% increase in resource generation for 6 seconds. The enhancement: Rally Cry grants allies Unstoppable, where damaging effects will have little to no effect on you. Ground Stomp. Cooldown 16 seconds. Critical hit chance 33%. Smash the ground in good old Barbarian fashion and deal 10% damage and stun surrounding enemies for 3 seconds. Enhancement: increase Ground Stomp stuns duration by 1 second. Iron Skin. Cooldown 14 seconds. Encompass yourself around a barrier that absorbs 50% damage for 5 seconds. Enhancement: Iron Skin absorbs 10% more damage while active. Challenging Shout. Cooldown 25 seconds. This shout makes you the target of surrounding enemies and provides you a times 40% damage reduction for 8 seconds. The enhancement: gain an additional times 20% bonus while active. Brawling skills provide you a well-balanced and defensive and offensive skill. It's always recommended to have these within your arsenal regardless of the build you are focusing on. Kick. Cooldown 25 seconds. Kick an enemy causing 19% damage and knocks them back. If they are knocked back into the terrain, they receive an additional 57% damage due to the environment and are stunned for 3 seconds. Enhancing the skill, kick an enemy adds the vulnerable trait for 4 seconds. Leap. Cooldown, 25 seconds. This is primarily one of the most used skills as you leap forward and slam down, dealing 34% damage and knocking back surrounding enemies. The enhancement for the skill, when leap does not damage an enemy, its cooldown is reduced by 4 seconds. War Cry. Cooldown, 25 seconds. This shout provides you and nearby allies an increase of times 15% damage for 8 seconds. The enhancement, War Cry, grants you the Berserker trait for 3 seconds. Charge. Cooldown, 25 seconds. Rush forward in quick fashion, pushing enemies with you and swinging through them, causing 26% damage and knocking them all back. Enhancing the skill, if they are knocked back into the terrain, they receive an additional 16% damage due to the environment and are stunned for 6 seconds. Weapon Mastery. These skills provide massive improvements on damage from your weapon without the need to use Fury. Death Blow. Cooldown 15 seconds. Critical hit chance 50%. Requirements: a slashing weapon. Attempt a heavy dealing death blow, dealing 126% damage to enemies in front of you. If this kills an enemy, its entire cooldown is reset. Enhancing this, death blow damage is increased by times 100% towards bosses. Rupture. Cooldown 15 seconds. Critical hit chance 50%. Rupture skewers enemies in front of you, causing 14% damage, and once you rip your weapons from them, they take an additional damage for the total bleeding amount and removes all bleed effects from them. The enhancement to this, when an enemy dies from Rupture, you reset its cooldown. If they survive, they get an increased times 20% damage in bleeding for the next 8 seconds. Steel Grasp. Cooldown 11 seconds. Charges 2. Critical hit chance 25%. Hone your inner Kratos and send out 3 chains that deal 24% damage and pull enemies in. Enhancing this, Steel Grasp makes enemies vulnerable for 2.5 seconds. Now we move on to your ultimate skills. Ultimate skills are heavy-hitting abilities with long cooldowns. You can only select one, which you believe will affect your build properly. I will list the upgrades for the ultimate skills as they are good to know so you can get a full grasp of the effects of them. Iron Maelstrom. Cooldown 60 seconds. Attach chains to your two-handed bludgeoning weapons and slam the ground. This deals 63% damage and stuns enemies for 2 seconds. Reactivate this to attach chains to your slashing weapons and deal 21% damage and 126% bleeding damage over 5 seconds to all enemies in front of you affected by the slash. Reactivate this for a 3rd time to attach chains to both your dual-wielding weapons and swing them in front of you, dealing 34% damage per hit. Upgrade 1 will give you a 10% increased critical strike chance and deal times 20% increased critical strike damage. Upgrade 2, dealing direct damage to any enemy after swapping weapons, reduces cooldown by 1 second. Call of the Ancients. Cooldown 50 seconds. Call upon 3 ancients to assist you in battle for 6 seconds. All ancients will have their own special abilities. Korlik leaps on enemies, dealing 80% damage, and swings his weapon in a frenzy state, dealing 30% damage per hit. Talik activates Whirlwind, attacking enemies, dealing 50% damage. Madwick upheaves the ground, dealing 150% damage to any enemy in his way. Upgrade 1, when Call of the Ancients is active, gain plus 10% increased attack speed and increased damage. Upgrade 2, Korlik gains 10 fury each time he damages an enemy with Frenzy. Talik slows enemies for 1 second when attacked by Whirlwind. Madwick gets a 30% chance to stun enemies for 3 seconds when using Upheaval. Wrath of the Berserker. Cooldown 60 seconds. Gain the trait Berserker and Unstoppable for 5 seconds. For the first 10 seconds, if you deal direct damage with basic skills, it grants you Berserker for 5 seconds. Upgrade 1. Gain plus 20% increased movement speed and times 30% fury generation while Wrath of the Berserker is active. Upgrade 2. Every 50 Fury you spend increases Berserker's damage bonus by 25%, while Wrath of the Berserker is active. These are primarily the skills of the Barbarian, and as I mentioned, I didn't cover all the upgradable options for a majority of them, and the reason why is because I foresee many of them potentially changing or tweaked as we near the release of the game, so thought it best to keep them off for the time being. Not to mention that with many of these skills there are a lot of other passive skills within the skill tree that can be activated to add additional cooldown restrictions, damage boost, and much more, but I may just save those for another video as this is already long enough. That is your Barbarian overview and what to expect from this tank class in Diablo IV. Barbarians have always been one of the most favorite classes and one that I always recommend for newcomers in this form of game, as it's a simplistic class with a lot of depth. What are your thoughts, and what builds are you looking to achieve with this class? Or are you even planning on playing a Barbarian? How about the Necromancer class, for example, which details can be found right here. I will be doing more deep dive videos for the classes coming up, so make sure to like and comment on the video and sub to the channel to help out. If you want access to videos 24 hours before release, how about supporting the channel through our Patreon page and can be found in the description of the video. As I mentioned earlier, HelloFresh has sponsored this video, so make sure to check the description for the link for HelloFresh. Thank you for watching, and see you in Sanctuary.